Hi, everyone. I'm going to give it just another minute or two. People are still filtering in. All right, we're going to get started here. So welcome everyone to the Community Sponsor Assisting with Housing webinar. My name is Zoe Atkins with Refugee Housing Solutions. The webinar today will be focusing on addressing common inquiries about securing both short-term and long-term housing solutions, and will equip attendees with effective strategies for connecting newcomer clients with the necessary resources to support and navigate these housing challenges successfully. And this will be led by subject matter experts with the IRC and Refugee Welcome Collective. Our four presenters today are Hannah, Grace, and David. So Hannah Presser is the Program Officer, Housing Technical Assistance at the International Rescue Committee. Hannah provides housing training and technical assistance to housing logistic and case management staff across the IRC's 27 U.S. field offices to build staff capacity and to ensure housing stabilization for recently arrived refugees in the United States. Hannah ensures that refugee housing practices are aligned with national, state, local, and donor requirements. Prior to her role at the IRC, Hannah was striving to provide safe, decent, and affordable housing while working for a New York City affordable housing developer. Hannah aims to provide support and resources to populations left vulnerable to the global housing crisis and to provide housing solutions to bring about change in this sector. Hannah is pursuing her master's in international affairs at the Baruch College in New York City. Hannah Scully is the Program Officer for Community Sponsorship at the IRC, where she supports IRC program offices with the design and implementation of local co-sponsorship programs. Hannah graduated from the University of Maryland with a degree in public health science and went on to serve as a Peace Corps volunteer in rural Zambia. Upon being evacuated from Zambia back to the United States due to the pandemic, Hannah worked in different COVID response roles before joining the IRC in Charlottesville in 2021, where she implemented her first co-sponsorship program in response to the influx of Afghan arrivals during APA. In Hannah's spare time, she enjoys traveling and anything outdoor related, including hiking, kayaking, skiing, and camping. Grace Gaskill is the Program Officer for Expanded Placement at the IRC. She works to provide technical assistance to community partners, sponsor circles, and private sponsor groups around the country to walk alongside them as they support new arrivals. After graduating from the University of Vermont, Grace started her career as an AmeriCorps Vista at Catholic Charities of Boston Refugee Resettlement Program in 2016, launching their first ever co-sponsorship program while obtaining her master's degree in global studies and international relations from Northeastern University. During the Trump administration, she spent 2.5 years coordinating Council on Foreign Relations, Religious and Foreign Policy program before feeling the pull to return to resettlement, which led her to the IRC in 2022. In her free time, Grace loves taking care of her plant collection, cleaning up after her extremely fluffy cat, and playing Mario Kart. David Sulewski is the Associate Director for Training and Engagement at Refugee Welcome Collective. He oversees the development and implementation of training and technical assistance across the RWC community sponsorship programs. David has worked with forcibly displaced persons in the United States and abroad and is committed to strengthening the role of agencies and communities in welcoming newcomers. Prior to joining RWC, David supported case management and co-sponsorship programs as a volunteer coordinator with the International Institute of New England. David has also consulted on projects for CWS, UNHCR, and the Shapiro Foundation, and has participated in the sponsor circle to welcome an Afghan family. He holds an MA in Human Security and Global Governance with a certificate in conflict resolution from the UMass Boston, where he is currently a PhD candidate researching the emergence of complementary pathways in Europe. Okay. Take it away.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Zoe. Hi, everyone. Thank you again for joining us today. My name is Hannah Presser, and I'm the Program Officer for Housing Technical Assistance with the International Rescue Committee. So today we're going to dive into the critical role that community sponsors and partners play in assisting with refugee housing, highlighting how their engagement expands the success of resettlement efforts. By cultivating a compassionate and inclusive environment, sponsors and hosts can help build strong foundations upon which newcomers can bolster their resiliency. From providing a warm welcome at the airport to opening doors of opportunity, communities and individuals who host refugees can help newcomers reshape their lives. So today we're really excited. We've got some great examples to go through what some of these partnerships look like, and we can discuss some steps that can be taken to implement some of these examples in your local area. So we already did some brief introductions. That's great. We'll get into an overview of our model at IRC, and we'll talk about some levels of engagement for community sponsors. And then we'll get into Refugee Welcome Collective is going to go through their models of learning, and then we'll also have some time at the end for a Q&A. So we can go to the next slide, please. So we do have a couple Slido questions that are built into our presentation today. And if you're unfamiliar with Slido, it's just a sort of question platform. You can go on your browser into slido.com and put in the code CS and housing, or you can take your camera on your phone and just scan it over this QR code. It'll pull up a link. You can click on it. It'll take you directly to our questions. And we just have a few examples of engagement where we can kind of go through and just have some quick little quizzes before we get started. So the first thing first, through Slido. So what is one thing that you must have in your home? So, an example for this, like for me, I love having like pictures. Like I love having pictures of my family, like all over, my friends, things like that. So what's one thing that you feel like you must have in your home? We would love to hear. And I think if you go to the hit next, maybe Zoe, it'll start showing some of the uh answers. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Bed, blankets, food, bedding, French press. Oh yeah, that's me all the way. Plants, coffee. Yeah, you guys are my people. I'm a big coffee person myself. My dog. That's great. Bathroom, peace. I feel that. Artwork. Yeah, these are all such great answers. I love seeing all of these. Natural light, Wi-Fi, a cozy corner. These are all such great examples. And the reason why we like to use this question kind of frequently, and we'll use it sort of as a reminder that when it comes to housing, all of us have something that we must have, right? Something that will make us feel comfortable or happy. And it's really important to acknowledge and keep in mind that in our work, many newcomers have undergone a lot of trauma and a lot of loss, which can make housing really emotional, really challenging. And it's key for us to remain empathetic and understanding to where they're coming from, even when it might be a challenge to do so. And having this baseline understanding can help us reconcile maybe some expectations with reality and services we're able to provide them as support as they transition into this new life. So we all have things that make us really comfortable, and it's important to sort of keep in mind that a lot of the folks that we're working with may be without their things that make them feel comfortable. And so we're really just doing the best that we can to help support people and make them feel welcomed. And that's a big part of community sponsorship. And just one more, right? This second. So finish the sentence. A welcoming community is what? For you, in your mind, what is a welcoming community? So we would love to know. Perfect. Inclusive. Accessible, that's a great one. Diverse, genuine, safe, these are all great. Yeah, accepting. Safe, warm, friendly, affordable, yes. Inclusive, warm, affordable, accepting. Yeah, these are all really, really great ones. Open-minded. Yeah, these are all so important. And when we're sort of figuring out what this looks like, what we want to do, what the kind of support, the levels of support we want to provide to our clients and to newcomers in general, it's really important that we keep these kinds of things in mind. And we want to make sure that we are providing clients with, friendly faces and warm greetings and, putting them in areas where they're feeling safe or accepting and accepted. And so really, really great work here, y'all. We really appreciate the engagement. These are all really key things that we also want to strive for when we're looking for community sponsor support. And so I think from here, I'm going to pass to my colleague, Hannah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, other Hannah. So hi, everyone. Again, my name is Hannah Scully, Program Officer for Community Sponsorship on the IRC's Resettlement team. So want to start by quickly giving a brief overview or refresher, if you're already familiar with it, of community sponsorship avenues. But if you go to the next slide, we'll do one more Slido, if you're not sick of Slido yet. But so the one more. So what comes to mind when you hear the term community sponsorship? Like any programs, any words, any feelings? What comes to mind? Cooperative, welcome. Yeah, absolutely. Church groups, welcomers, team effort, all of it. Yes, totally agreed with all of these. Circle of welcome, emotional and financial support. Financial support, yeah, definitely. Collaboration, more financial support. Yeah, definitely agree. Finding housing, yes, very on theme with today. More financial support, yeah, all of these volunteers, and for me also a lot of the words that were coming up on welcoming community. So welcome, accepting, community, integration, all of those things. A resource for support, but not to be relied on, a stepping stone to self-sufficiency, advocates, cultural orientation, offering your skills. Yes, all of these, I love them all so much. So thank you all so much. This was, I totally agree. These are all words that are very, very precise. So thank you so much. So you can go to the next slide. So community sponsorship is an umbrella term that describes different avenues in which refugees or other newcomers are paired with community groups that provide volunteer services and integration support. So these programs can be put into two different categories. So resettlement agency-led and community-led. So resettlement agency-led programs involve community groups partnering with a local or national resettlement agency and working collaboratively to support a newcomer case. On the other hand, we have community-led initiatives. So these are initiatives where groups of private citizens, community members can work independently of a resettlement agency to sponsor refugees and other newcomers. So you can go to the next slide. So within the IRC network, on the resettlement agency-led side of the programs, we work with co-sponsor groups and community partners all over the country, and these initiatives really are growing a lot in scale. So co-sponsorship refers to groups within 100 miles of a resettlement agency that partner with a local resettlement agency like the IRC to support a refugee case with some or all of the really essential service delivery, like finding housing, employment, enrolling the family in English language classes, and many others. while community partners, also known as remote placement, that refers to groups who are not within 100 miles of any local resettlement agency. And these groups partner with a national resettlement agency like the IRC headquarters or another national resettlement agency, and provide their partnered family with all of the service delivery while being supported remotely. So you can see on the screen here where we have active sponsorship programs. So the green is where we have active co-sponsorship programs. And then the blue and purple are where we have remote placement sites. So 22 of our local offices have co-sponsorship programs, with 10 of them launching in the past year. So it's really growing a lot. And in the past 12 months, our offices have recruited and matched 27 co-sponsor groups to 162 clients. And at headquarters, we've established 5 community partners who are supporting 27 clients. So within community sponsorship, the requirements, and we can go to the next slide. The requirements and responsibilities vary depending on the specific sponsorship program, but there are generally 3 main requirements in all sponsorship programs. The first is a time commitment. Time commitment ranges from 3 months to a year, depending on the program, with 6 months being the average amount of time asked of sponsor groups. The second is a resource or financial commitment, as many of you mentioned on the Slido, financial support. And again, the amount and the type of resource contribution varies, but groups are generally providing either in-kind donations, cash donations, or both. And the last requirement is a group, so having a team. So sponsorship teams typically need to form groups. They range in size, but the average size sponsor group will be between 6 and 10 individuals. So with that, I'm gonna pass it over to my colleague Grace, who's gonna provide some examples of how community sponsor groups have engaged with the refugee housing support.
Thank you so much, Hannah, and excited to be here with you all today. So as mentioned earlier, I'm the IRC's Program Officer for Expanded Placement. And essentially what that means is that I have the benefit of getting to work with lots of community sponsor groups all around the country. And one really exciting part of doing that has been looking at how folks have approached housing and the interesting and unique strategies that they've come up with to try and tackle this big initial resettlement responsibility. It can be very daunting to have to find housing for a newcomer family. So it causes people and groups to be really creative. So part of what we wanted to discuss with you today was how you can sort of leverage some of those creative options in your own communities as you're looking to find housing for the families that you'll be working with. So we are going to look at 3 sort of levels of investment when it comes to finding housing. We're going to start with low investment ways to look for and secure housing for newcomer families. So we've had groups around the country have a lot of success by reaching out to local community meetings and asking to speak at their maybe monthly or quarterly meetings about what your group is hoping to do, and also specifically the need for low-cost housing that this family will require. Now, organizations that we've had relationships with in the past, maybe like a Rotary Club. We've also worked with Lions Clubs to help look for housing and support for clients. Junior leagues, could be something as small as a book club or a parent-teacher association, or maybe something larger like a faith group in your area. And if you're not much of a public speaker, I hear you 100%. Writing in that group's newsletter could be equally as effective. And what this will allow you to do is really just reach community members that you probably would never have thought to reach before. And anytime you can use another group's pre-existing membership, you should absolutely do that. Another potential option for maybe a low investment housing search strategy is to post on a neighborhood community group. And this could be anything from something like a Nextdoor app, if you're familiar with that. It's a platform that allows neighbors to post things that are happening in the neighborhood, as well as maybe a local Buy Nothing Facebook group or a local community group. What I think sponsors have experienced when reaching out to these groups is that they just reach people they never would have known existed before. And they've been able to leverage housing options from people that they've never met. So these sort of low investment strategies can actually pack quite a punch when it comes to finding housing. So next, we're going to look at some slightly higher investment options for looking for housing. And these are really dependent on what resources are available in your community, but we have had groups around the country of all different types of community sponsorship have really good luck by working with faith communities to leverage church-owned housing. This could be maybe a rectory or an empty convent. We've had folks in New Mexico use a long empty rectory to house a newly arrived family. Parishes have done similar things in Tulsa, Oklahoma, as well as in Indiana and Pennsylvania, where resettlement agencies and sponsors actually use convent housing to house newly arrived families. And this is something that a lot of times people won't think of when they're first thinking of how to find housing resources, but a lot of times these church-owned properties are left empty for a long time and can be a really good potential option for finding low cost or even sometimes free housing for clients. Similarly, we've had groups really benefit from reaching out to local universities in their area. Specifically, our Spokane office had partnered last year with Washington State University to house 2 Afghan refugee families on campus in apartment-style housing, actually on campus. In addition, the school was able to help provide a lot of, supports to that family and a lot of hand-holding with them in addition to the housing. And a lot of times colleges have properties that they're not using too, or extra rooms that they could use to house refugee families or singles. Similarly, the Ethiopian Community Development Council World Learning Platform used their campus in the summer of 2021 to house Afghan families. And in the town of in Brattleboro, Vermont, they actually worked with community members to help move folks from university housing into permanent housing too. A lot of these options are things that traditional resettlement agencies might not always have thought of, and community sponsors around the country are really invigorating this search to find new strategies for finding housing. So I encourage you to, think about some of these medium investment opportunities as you're going through your, list of resources in your community to try and tackle this housing issue. And lastly, we're going to focus on high investment options. And these options here are not going to be doable for every community sponsor group. So, we understand that this type of thing just might be out of reach for some groups, but we still wanted to highlight these because groups have had very good luck with the strategies on the slide right now. So we have a community partner in Kalispell, Montana, that actually purchased a duplex in which to use to house refugees on an ongoing basis. And since they are technically the owners of the property, they're able to set a low cost rental amount, which is very hard to find in their area. So similarly, affiliates in Sacramento bought a large 7-unit apartment to be able to use to house refugees on an ongoing basis. Now, a housing option this big might not be suitable for every community sponsor, but if you're working with larger amounts of clients, that could be a really good resource. Now, another option that we've seen have success around the country is community sponsor groups actually co-signing leases or subleasing to newcomer families. And we've had community partners in Potsdam, New York do that, in Montana, as well as in Chicago. And a big reason that this has so much success is because a lot of times landlords and property management companies are just more comfortable renting to a person that's already in the country that maybe has some rental history and a credit score. Often refugees do not have those things right away. So this can sort of make a property owner maybe feel more comfortable renting to a newly arrived refugee family who doesn't have a credit score, if they have someone else on the lease that's able to help pick up the slack for them if necessary. So we hope that these strategies sort of get your wheels turning as you're thinking about how best to tackle this housing issue. Okay, so if you're thinking about getting involved with community sponsorship and haven't done so yet, we can provide some next steps for you briefly. The next slide. So if you are within 100 miles of a local IRC office or another resettlement agency, then you could reach out to them to discuss co-sponsorship. If you happen to be in an area that's a bit more remote and maybe doesn't have a local resettlement agency within 100 miles, then then a good option for you would be to explore community partnership through IRC headquarters. I will put my email in the chat to reach out about any of these programs, including community partnership. And also another option that could be available to you is to form a private sponsor group through Welcome Corps or the Sponsor Circles program, which do not have any radius requirements. So groups in any part of the country can get involved with either program. So if you'd like more information about any of these, you can register for a community sponsorship informational session with the IRC. We hold them every month, and we'll dive deep into each of these types of programs, the differences between them, and how you can go about getting involved. Okay, go to the next slide. And I'm going to pivot over to my colleague at RWC to discuss their models of engagement.
Hello, my name is David Selesky, and I'm with the Refugee Welcome Collective, or RWC, as our Associate Director for Training and Engagement. And I'm really excited to be a part of this webinar on such an important topic. But I'm just going to take just a few minutes just to introduce our work and share an example of some models of engagement as it relates to housing. So yeah, so who we are, Refugee Collective, we're a community sponsorship technical assistance provider funded by PRM and Office of Refugee Resettlement. And we aim to improve outcomes for refugees resettled through the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program by building capacity and expanding community sponsorship. And so just to add on, like how do we do our work? We work very closely with national and local resettlement agencies like our colleagues at IRC, as well as with sponsors, volunteers, and refugees who are paired with sponsors through our collective to identify what are the needs, develop tools, resources, and setting priorities. And our collective members are community sponsorship experts from national and local resettlement agencies located across the country. And why do we do this work? We want to support sponsors, and we want to support those working in sponsorship because refugee and community sponsor partnerships make very strong and vibrant and welcoming communities that benefit us all. So on the next slide, I'll just give a brief overview of some of our activities and how we support sponsor groups, as well as staff working in community sponsorship and refugee newcomers paired with sponsors. We offer training, both live and off the shelf. We also provide one-on-one group technical assistance or guided conversations for sponsors, staff, case managers, sponsors, as well as refugees. And we also have program supports such as guides, toolkits, manuals. And one also that I'll highlight is we have twice monthly a live learning space called Lunch and Learn, which is a webinar for community sponsors, volunteers, in which we have featured guest speakers that cover critical topics for supporting refugee families in their communities. And luckily, because we are our RWC is part of Church World Service, and we're very fortunate to have our colleagues, Refugee Housing Solutions. We collaborate very much with them and refer to them as well for supports and technical assistance when it comes to this topic of housing. And even just recently, we've had guest speakers from Refugee Housing Solutions speak at our Lunch and Learn. So it's a really great opportunity for anyone to join those. You can go to our website and you can join these conversations to really like sort of dive deep into some of the various topics related to housing. Just our last one we had a few days ago was really on the topic of how do you manage the housing and income gap. And it's also for staff a really helpful resource as a way of engaging with community sponsor groups that they're working with. And then on the next slide, just if possible to go to the next slide. Just to highlight one more recently released resource, which is our community sponsorship manual, which is aimed to educate and equip sponsors, provides an introduction to refugee resettlement, a week-by-week checklist, and has these tip sheets for core services, one of which is focused on housing and giving tips, like many of the ones that are here, kind of amplifying these best practices from our members and partners, tips on how to go about the housing search, talking with landlords, understanding the lease, knowing what kinds of supports and services are out there for housing. And then on, I think, the last slide for my portion, Grace did highlight this as one of those medium investment levels. I believe where the case in Brattleboro, Vermont. So an opportunity if you wanted to learn more about that. Refugee Welcome Collective and Refugee Housing Solutions produced together in collaboration with World Learning and its School of International Training, this video case study that highlights this this model that Grace shared with us, where they were able to provide that temporary housing for welcoming Afghan newcomers in fall of 2021, and then working with community partners to help transition them into a more permanent housing. So happy to drop the link to that video that you can watch on your own time. Thank you. And if I think on the next slide, it just shares how you can visit us to get in touch. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I think we can move to the next slide. So we have some time here set aside for questions. We're happy to help field any questions that y'all may have about community sponsorship or maybe some of the levels of engagement that we talked about today. So we're happy to take any of those now. Funding sources. Someone said funding sources. So Hannah, Grace, do one of y'all want to speak a little bit more about funding and how that works for community sponsorship?
Yeah, I can just speak to for co-sponsorship. Well, I think for all sponsorship programs, there isn't funding typically comes directly from the community sponsor groups themselves. Like there's for the partnerships with resettlement agencies, we don't have, or for co-sponsorship, we don't have any funding available for our co-sponsors. So most of our sponsors are fundraising in the community. Like I said, the groups can be typically between 6 and 10 people, but many of our sponsor groups are fundraising much beyond that, just 10 people. So creating GoFundMe accounts or other fundraising mechanisms to solicit funds from their local community members and friends and family. But Grace, anything to add there?
Yeah, oftentimes groups are able to similarly fundraise by working with local organizations or churches or universities, all of whom are able to help contribute some initial funds. I've also worked with some community sponsors that have worked with local banks to provide grants that they are therefore able to use on housing. So those are also some strategies. Each level of community sponsorship has slightly different fundraising requirements, so I won't go over all of them now. But in some like Welcome Corps, in-kind donations, like maybe donated housing, can actually contribute to those initial funds that you have to raise. So in some situations, it doesn't actually have to be cash funding.
Perfect. Thanks, Hannah and Grace. Any other questions? I know, Arjun, you have your hand raised if you want to maybe unmute or put your question in the Q&A.
David, there's a question for you. It asks, are the past RWC webinars and/or lunch and learns available to watch?
Yes, they are. If you go to our website, which I think has already been dropped in the chat, Refugee Welcome Collective. We have a resource library where all of our resources are posted. You can also see recordings of our past webinars. You can sign up to stay engaged, to get a newsletter, and stay abreast to upcoming webinars, lunch and learns, and trainings. So yeah, it's all there. And please feel free. We'd love to have you engage. Thanks.
We have another question that says, isn't owning a property and housing them there a conflict of interest?
Well, in our situation, the property owner who bought the house to use to house refugees had to go through some fairly extensive training and background checks before they were able to house a family there. So they also sent the lease to me to review to make sure that their plan for subsidizing rent was not problematic in any way. And also to avoid this potential conflict of interest, they meet frequently with the family to discuss the lease, to discuss changes that are needed around the apartment, and to discuss any changes to the rental amount. So to sort of curb the chances for a potential conflict of interest, we sort of implemented some additional requirements and suggestions for after the family arrived, to make sure the family was really clear cut on what was expected of them, how to make complaints, and how to ask for repairs. And it has gone very well. And the family currently living in that home is, they've said they never want to move. So it's working well so far.
Great, thank you, Grace. Any other questions? I know there's a lot of information today, but we're also
I see Arjun.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Zoe.
Sorry, Hannah. I see Arjun clarified asking about their agency owning a property for rental and if that would be an issue.
I assume the agency would do similar things to what we recommended of the community partner. And also a lot of, in some instances of agencies buying housing, it's just used for temporary housing while they look for permanent housing for the family. So it's sometimes used to try and avoid having to use something like a hotel or an Airbnb. So, but in any instance, communicating to newcomers would be really important about what the requirements of their lease are, who to go to if they had any concerns, and who at the resettlement agency or the private sponsor group they could go to if they had any issues with the housing or the landlord specifically.
Yeah, Grace, that's exactly what I was going to say too. There are usually some other layers of conversations and policies and guidance that are put in place. when there is an ownership for that situation. And so typically, like Grace said, that's used for temporary housing. And there's specific guidance on any direct assistance or funds that are being used in that. And so that's sort of determined at the local level and usually thought about and established prior to any occupancy of those different kinds of models.
Laura's asking, are there any details about the model in Sacramento that could be replicated at other agencies?
This wasn't a model that came through IRC, so I think RHS or RWC, this may be one that you're more familiar with if you're able to share more details about that.
So Opening Doors Sacramento, I just pinged my colleagues to double check, but we have a best practice toolkit on our website that we've asked a few folks to fill out. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that they had filled out one of those best practice toolkits. I'm not sure if we're able to disseminate that information, but they are definitely willing to share that information about how to replicate this model. I'm working with them currently with another affiliate in OC. But yeah, let me see if I can get that information to you, Laura. And then David asks, government funding, rental assistance, housing development.
Hannah, Professor, could you speak to that just with refugees accessing government funding for housing?
Yeah, so there's actually a lot of information out there on RHS's website. And I can drop y'all's resource page on different government funding that's accessible to newcomers. And actually, just a couple months ago, RHS did a really great webinar in partnership with HUD where they had a HUD representative come on and kind of spend the hour discussing what different rental assistance programs are accessible to our clients and newcomers in general. So I will definitely link to those, but it's very, very subjective on availability and eligibility, and those are often very varying throughout the year and throughout your different localities. So it just sort of depends. But those are really great resources, and I will drop them here in the chat shortly. Any other questions while we're here? We still have some time. So Arjun, housing choice vouchers, that is something that was covered during the HUD webinar, and I'll link to that again. And there, to my knowledge, they are applicable to newcomers. It just sort of depends. I think, there may be some confusion on the local level at that. We've had that happen a couple times too, or we maybe have to clarify on the spot. But I will link to that. Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you, Selena. So Selena just put the webinar in there, and that kind of goes into that a little bit more. But yeah, and then there was another resource that I was thinking of too from the RHS website. Yeah, perfect. Demystifying HUD. Yep, that's great. So yeah, there are different eligibilities for different programs, but to my understanding, the choice vouchers are eligible to newcomers. Any other questions while we're here? Yeah, you're welcome, Solomon. Well, if there are no other questions, then we can just end a couple minutes early. But thanks so much, everyone. We really appreciate you taking the time to attend today. And if you ever have any questions, we'll make sure that you'll have our contact information. You can always reach out to RHS and they'll connect us. So we just really appreciate y'all taking the time, and we hope you found today's session helpful. So thanks so much. Thanks, everyone.